All right, we're looking quite full here. Good. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're about the 4 minute after mark. Good evening, everyone, or afternoon, I should say. It feels like evening to me, but good afternoon. Welcome to The Path Forward, presented by Georgia Power, and our session, which is The Voices of Equity and Energy. I am Pamela Fan. I am the Director of Membership and Diversity Integration for SEEA, Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. In this session, we really wanted to present this for you to hear specifically from Black male leaders in energy and get their perspective on social justice, equity, and integration within our industry. To lead this discussion today, we have our moderator, Dr. Anthony Kinslow. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you all could please ensure that your phones are on mute. And for this discussion, until the last 10 minutes, if you'd like to keep your videos off, that's fine. But for the Q&A session, we're going to do a live Q&A session. I'd like for you all to either raise your hand or put in chat if you have a question. I will call on you to ask your question directly to the panelist. And if you don't feel like, being visible and having that question asked, let me know and I can read it off for you. That's not a problem, but we will do that in the last 10 minutes. So please hold your questions to the end. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Anthony Kinslow. Dr. Kinslow is the founder and CEO of Gemini Energy Solutions. He is an expert in energy efficiency and a research-oriented practitioner who utilizes best practices from around the world to develop innovative solutions for his clients. His company's focus is reflective of his mission in life, making meaningful impact on mitigated global warming. He's also created through his company, a vehicle to engage, educate, and energize underrepresented minority communities and let the underserved small commercial building market in energy efficiency. Under Anthony's leadership, Gemini is implementing strategies for overcoming cultural and socioeconomic barriers that prevent the vast majority of Americans from being aware or engaged in energy efficiency. Operating nationwide, his company also partners with municipalities such as San Francisco International Airport and Memphis, Tennessee. And he helps them by supporting their efforts to meet their climate change goals and increase economic resiliency through energy efficiency. Anthony is also an adjunct lecturer at Stanford University, where he teaches about racial equity in energy. Anthony earned his PhD in civil and environmental engineering from Stanford University, an MS in sustainable design and construction, also from Stanford, and his BS in civil and environmental engineering from North Carolina A&T State University. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony, and you will find the rest of our panelists, their full bios are also located on our website and through the Eventbrite where you ordered your tickets. So with further ado, Anthony, thank you.
Thanks, Pam. And I'm kind of embarrassed after you read my whole bio, but I encourage everyone to go check out everyone else's bio. As Pam just said, I'm going to do a quick introduction with who we have here today. I'm really excited to be able to talk with these brothers. And as you'll see and hear, they got a lot to say, and I'm hoping everyone takes something from it. So first off, Marshall Cherry, Chief Operating Officer for Rowan Electric Cooperative. He's been in the utility space since 1993. We got Phil Krosky, CEO and co-founder of MD Energy Advisors, who started this company in 2010, so over 10 years in the energy space. We have Hewitt Joseph, who's Director of Sustainability and Engineering at Cox Enterprises, and he's been in the industry since 1990. And then myself, I started my company 3 years ago in 2017. So we have a nice diversity of ages and ranges of time in this space. And we're gonna get going. I'm gonna start it off round robin, quick yes, no answer for everybody here. And when I say everybody, just for everyone listening, I'm talking about just us four. Would we have had this conversation this time last year? So a quick yes or no, and then I'm gonna ask people to expound on it.
jump in, Marshall, and I'll say no. Our time have allowed for these kinds of conversations. I would have to vote no.
Okay.
Yeah, Marshall here, same. I would vote no. We certainly experienced a lot of experiences this year that have led us to this space, but definitely not same time last year. We would not have had this conversation.
And Anthony, I would add to that. I would definitely say emphatically no. We wouldn't have had this discussion a year ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with all of you. I think we're all on the same page about how the murder of George Floyd in particular has really pushed conversations in places and spaces that haven't been happening before. So I want to really go into that though, dive a little bit deeper into kind of this risk of being honest and why this conversation would have happened a year ago. Phil, you want to start us off?
Yeah, and thanks, Anthony. And it's a privilege and a pleasure to be on the panel with Marshall and Hewitt. And I look forward to hearing more from them. But yeah, I think, it was George Floyd, but I think, I would also add that the COVID pandemic has forced us to pause. I have spent more time in my home than I think I ever have in my lifetime, and it's also given us an opportunity to reevaluate life and also the humanity of others. So I think it's a combined of not only just what happened with George Floyd, because quite honestly, we've seen George Floyd before, but in this moment, we've had an opportunity to sit still and really reconcile some things that we haven't reconciled before. And so I think, you add, what happened with George Floyd and the fact that, we were all kind of captive in our homes at the time, and we were forced to kind of deal with this issue, I think is really what brings us to today.
Jump in, either one of you, Marshall. Marshall.
I'll go ahead, Hewitt. Definitely agree with Phil. We must certainly raise the awareness around the pandemic as well. Going back to your earlier question, Anthony, definitely there's a reason why we haven't had these conversations or wouldn't have had them in the past. And just truthfully, the George Floyd murder just raised the systemic issue. Again, Phil has said it. We've seen George Floyd before, but the optics around that and, of course, the severity of everything that we all experience, I will say created some levels of empathy, through many of us. And so the acknowledgement that there's something different about being an African American in America in general, that there are issues, and particularly times of even interacting with the police. And so we still, though, through all of that, still must work through. And I guess I'll raise the first microaggression today of things like, I don't see color. There are still people who are out there who will say such. And that's very, misleading. Obviously, we can look at this screen. You all can look at me right now and you can see that I'm a Black male. And so certainly there's something inherently different about me, but we can all work through that. But we have to first and foremost acknowledge it and not put on the blinders. And so just acknowledge that there's something systemic. And so we're all seeing more of that, but we still have a ways to go. And so this really raised the level of awareness around some of the systemic issues that would allow a policeman to put his knee on a man's neck for almost 9 minutes and nothing has really happened. So we're at a critical point now, though, where we must work toward putting some things into action, and I'll just talk about those in answering another question.
Yeah, Anthony, if I may jump in, again, I thank everybody for joining. This is it can be a tough topic to hear and participate in, but piggybacking on what Marshall and Phil have said, I think the pandemic forced us to pause and take a look at this stuff as it was happening in real life. I think social media has definitely played a huge part in this because everything is videotaped and instantly available to us as information. But my fear, as Marshall started to transition into where we are now and where we are in the future, my fear is that we're becoming numb to it because it hasn't stopped. And it's still continuing. We just had a recent incident in Columbus, Ohio. And I have some friends in Columbus who are very very aware of it, very upset and shaken by what's going on there, where a young man was killed by police, mistaking him with having a gun in his hand, but in fact it was a Subway sandwich, so to speak. As far as the facts that I know today, of course, all that can change. I'm not up there. But I also deal with the dichotomy of having a brother who is a police officer in the city of New Orleans. And every night I pray he comes home to his family. But he still has to have that same conversation with his 19-year-old son that I had to have with my son. So I guess in all, I don't want us to become numb to it. In conversations like we're having today and in our companies are keeping it going. And I think that's a win so far. That's a win.
Made a mistake of muting myself. I'm sorry. No, I think you touched on something, Hewitt, with that it's a tough topic to talk about, right? And also the talk that we've all had, that our parents have had to give to us, that I will have to give to my 10-month-old son when he becomes to a certain age. And it reminds me of, say, Trayvon Martin, and how I was so convinced that the person who killed him would receive justice for that, right? Would be going to jail. And sitting with my dad, and my dad saying, I wouldn't get too confident about that, right? He's seen that before. And me just pushing him off about that, like, you're jaded, right? And so just not just becoming numb to it, but also becoming jaded to it. I would add this idea of the expectation that nothing's going to happen.
It can be tough, and I've had that same thing.
Oh, did we lose you?
But you hear me?
Oh, now I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that same sense, and that's my real fear, is that we become numb to it. It's like watching a horror movie, and the murders don't affect you anymore after you watch so much of it. So that's my real fear.
Yeah. So and to Phil and Marshall, kind of moving to kind of this tough topic. Not every time, every experience we have is someone putting their knee on your neck, right? There's other times that you're treated unfairly just because of being Black, but it's some often nuance. So I throw it to everyone, kind of, how do y'all tell the difference? You know, how do you determine when you're being treated unfairly because you're Black versus just something you actually did or a legitimate reason?
I'll jump in first, Phil. I'll just say, for me, many times I'll just say that there are actions that I see that are coming on the back end of some microaggressions. You know, to tell me I speak so well, obviously we all know that that's just so disrespectful and so much of an insult. I'm not where I am. I mean, what did you expect when I came into the door? Or there'd be times where I may enter a meeting and I may go in with colleagues who do not look like me, my Caucasian colleagues who don't look like me, and I may really be the decision maker going into the group. And I've seen times whereas folks will gravitate to them and have that conversation with them as if they're the decision maker. But then after I start talking and talk about it at a very high level, there's a pivot. There's oh, this is the guy. He's the one I need to really be talking to. I've even had folks come up to me during breaks and they will say, man, I feel like such an idiot. I just didn't know that you were the leader, you know, in the group. And so, so you just kind of deal with it at that level. And most of us, you know, even going back to the police, we've talked about that. We've dealt with the police. I know for me, there have been times I've been pulled over and felt that I had to carry the highest level of responsibility in de-escalating the situation. Had it gone another way with any sense of anger, then that story could have easily been Marshall Cherry being that person. And so really beyond that, just feeling as if I need to prove that there's legitimacy as to why I am where I am. I'll give you a very specific example. This was just this year, before the pandemic. Obviously, we were all traveling. I was at a conference down in Florida, and I actually was a speaker at a session there about some of these high impact programs that we're doing. And typically, I've been in the business long enough where I don't do a whole lot of late night, you know, social activities, but I had a couple of colleagues of mine who wanted to, you know, have a few drinks. So we go to the bar And so in doing so, there was a gentleman there who I knew he singled me out. He bumped into me. After we bumped into each other, there was a sly remark that he gave. And then on the back end of the remark, out of all the people, there are about 10 folks in my group, he felt most comfortable asking me all of the questions as to why I was why was I there, what did I do, all that kind of stuff. And generally my default response is, I'm going to ask you the same question that you asked me. I'll just give you a little bit about me. If I sit down beside you in an airplane and within 3 questions, you're asking me, what do I do? Then I'm going to come right behind that. Okay, well, what do you do? You know? And so this guy, I could tell he didn't like the fact that I was responding in kind, but certainly I just felt like if I had to be put in a position to feel like I was the one who had to be legitimate as to why I was there, then certainly I had to reciprocate, you know, that very same. And so I could tell he didn't like it. And in doing so, eventually, you know, in some of his responses, I could tell he started to talk to me as if he wanted to pull me into a physical situation. And so it got to a point where my colleagues who were with me actually were able to help, you know, kind of move all of us away from that situation. But it was a teachable moment for my colleagues. And I even told them on the back end of all of that, I said, see, you all, this is really what it's like to be an African American in America. Now here I am just as innocent. I'm hanging out with you all. We're talking about, you know, things that have transpired today, but I use it as some healthy dialogue to say, this is why. I mean, people feel emboldened right now by some of the rhetoric that they hear, that they can say exactly what they want to say. And so that was my opportunity really to share it with, even with my colleagues who may have been numb to it all these years.
I'll jump in a little bit. I mean, we've all had those microaggressions. You get them in your business life. You get them in the grocery store. You get them on vacation. Or why are you here in this vacation spot? You get them everywhere, and it just becomes, I hate to use the word again, numb. But to your point, how do you know? I really think it's a combination of facts, like Marshall's talked about the facts of the situation, but there's also this gut feel. I mean, if someone's asking you, well, why are you in the Hyatt hotel or the top echelon hotel, and they make assumptions that you don't belong there, those gut punches are what you start to compile, and you know what you're dealing with pretty quickly. You don't want to jump to conclusions. I don't think we try to do that, but I'm past 50 in my years, right? And you can compile a pretty good judgment of what's going on. I had an opportunity, and I think I talked with Anthony about this in my warm up to the session. I had the opportunity as a mentee to Pat Esser, who's the head of Cox Cable, and I asked Pat in my leadership meetings with him, well, how do you make these tough decisions when you don't have all the facts? When you get enough data and you still got to make the tough decision. He said to me in that meeting, and I related to what I'm talking about, he said to me, you go with your gut. And the more times you go with your gut over your career, the better you will get with it, the better feel you'll have. And that's the same thing when you have these microaggressions and these racial incidents that happen to you along your path in life. You begin to compile and know within your gut what's going on. Sometimes it's not the facts. It's not the clear-cut selection between me and my white brother or sister, but it is that gut feel that you get in those situations that says, yes, that wasn't right. That's not the way it should have gone had my skin color been different.
Yeah, and Anthony, repeat the question again, because I think it's just repeat the question, because I think there's some power in just that question alone.
Yeah, how do you determine when you're being treated unfairly because you're a Black man versus a legitimate concern?
So that question alone really, like, I mean, how many white men even think about that? You know, they take it as face value that the person who's they're interacting with is either a jerk or whatever the case may be, but they never have to wonder whether there were some racial overtones in regards to that interaction. And that's a powerful question, because I'll have to answer it honestly. I don't know. You know, I don't know exactly when someone, you have a gut feel, and especially being in business, you know, I've been asked at times, well, how much are you making on this? And so I have to ask myself, would you ask that same question to someone who didn't look like me on how much I'm making off of this particular project or how much, and it becomes challenging. Let me just give you a point of view, and I think it's really profound. I was watching an interview with the former president, Barack Obama, and he made mention, because it's just not for us. It's not Marshall, Hewitt, and Phil. I mean, he made a really good example in this interview. He said, you may recall when there was a huge uproar about him wearing a tan suit, a tan suit. There was a huge uproar about him wearing a tan suit. And there were very few, I would say, controversies, you know, forget the policies and the policy controversies as related to him, the human being. And you juxtapose that with the most recent, the current president, where there seems to be controversy and just an aura of just chaos and conflict around him everywhere. And I don't want to get too political, but I just want to maybe strike the difference between, you know, the presidency of, you know, Barack Obama and the presidency of Donald Trump, where there was so little room for error. And there was such, you know, uproar and controversy over tan suits when no one even bothered to mention anything about suits or anything. There were other issues that we were focused on as it relates to the Donald Trump presidency. So I think that's a very national look of how things are starkly different. And, you know, I become aware, now I'll be quiet after this, I become aware of even privilege of being a man and being a female, you know, and we all have various privileges. I had two parents growing up. That's a privilege. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to understand and identify what that privilege is, what those privileges are, because you'll be a lot more aware of it in your day-to-day interactions.
No, man, I hit on a few things. And then Marshall and Hewitt, y'all both talked about legitimacy, right? Like this need for legitimacy. And I feel the same way. I mean, one of the driving reasons I got a PhD was for legitimacy. I was like, I knew from an early age as a Black man, without a PhD, people weren't going to listen to me, right? That was just something that I was aware of from an early age. And Phil, to your point about the fact that you have to think about that, the fact that as a kid, you have to learn that the world as a kid is America, right? That America is going to be treating you differently as soon as you walk out that door. One of the reasons why HBCU was so powerful for me was that you got a reprieve from that for a little bit, right? You were surrounded by a bubble of safety and security to grow and develop without that constant in the back of your head that y'all all know about of how do I present myself? How do I make sure that I'm seen as legitimate in the position that I earned, right? From our experience, and then talking about experiences, and talking about kind of the rare occasion that we have for Black men in the energy sector having conversations like these, right? Why are there not more Black men in the utility and clean energy space?
I'll start.
I'll defer to you, Hewitt.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I've been starting too much. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I'll just say this. Look, I think when you look across the board in business in America, you know, the only area that Black men specifically have dominated has been sports and entertainment. And then even take it a level step lower. When you talk, Anthony, you and I talked about this. There's even no ownership when you talk about that. That's just more, you know, entertainment and athletes on the field. They're on the stage or on the field. However, what we've done in America very successfully, we have a great pipeline of football players, basketball players, African-American players. And that is one industry in which it is, I would think, a meritocracy, where if you have the skill sets to achieve, you'll make it. America has done a very poor job of creating those same pipelines for African-American men. Now, that's not to say that there are no opportunities, but disproportionately, we represent sports and entertainment beyond our, you know, based on us making up 13, 14% of the population. And there's been an intentionality in developing that, because if you're a good basketball player, you can wind up at Georgetown or Stanford or anything else. However, and you could come from a low income area. However, those same opportunities aren't for that kid who is just really, a good student. No one's coming to recruit that student to these top universities and areas. And so basically I say, and I'll wrap it up, Anthony, there has to be intentionality in Black and brown kids getting into this sector. And it starts at the corporate level.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Definitely, there's a need for a major workforce development effort to start early and making sure, that our young people understand really how rewarding these careers can be. I mean, even as a line technician, that could be a very rewarding career without any student loan debt. You're going through the community college, and in many cases, it's on-the-job training. And there are certainly opportunities where we must do a better job of making sure that we create that pipeline and help people understand the opportunity that's available. Obviously, some of these things are very traditional. We've used the word systemic throughout this platform a couple of times, and we can acknowledge that some of that is out there in this industry. I look at the industry that I'm in. I'm of course in the electric cooperative space, and there are 900 businesses, like the electric distribution utility that I work for, 900 across this country. We have 3 African Americans who are CEOs right now. So certainly there's a disparity and an opportunity where we can do better, and we must really do better. And we all understand the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know we're going to talk about that at some point, but we just have to do a much better job in terms of making sure that our young people understand really the benefits of entry into the business as a whole. And certainly this space is one that's not going anywhere. It's very safe. You get into the industry, certainly there are so many folks who have 40, 45, seen folks, 40, 45-year careers in this industry. And so, definitely we'll have to continue that, to be aggressive in our outreach and making sure. But there are some things that have been systemic over the years as well, and we can acknowledge that for what it is. But we're at a critical time now where there's an opportunity where we can break through some of it.
I'll jump in a little bit, and I don't know if we're time, but I think utilities have to do a better job. I think the utility industry has to do a better job in the recruitment process, in making themselves an appealing place to work. I just harken back to when I was at Georgia Tech and coming out of school. I had 4 or 5 different opportunities at various companies, in California and elsewhere. And I had one opportunity at a utility company, the Tennessee Valley Authority. And I did not go to TVA. I did not choose TVA in terms of my career start because, wow, that was a job for me. I chose that because my father told me, don't pass up a good government job. And it just happened to be in energy and in energy conservation. And it's something that I've enjoyed going forward. But it was not the sexy job. The sexy jobs are, working for Clorox or IBM or, now Google and these other kinds of companies. Whereas I think, if utilities would promote themselves as a great place to work, I think you could attract more and diverse talent. The other thing I think is where are you going to find the talent? Where do you go? I think Anthony mentioned, North Carolina A&T. My first college was Dillard University in New Orleans. There was no one from the utility company showing up at those locations to recruit African American males and females to come to those jobs. I think we have to broaden our search and go where the talent is. You can't expect the talent to come to you, but you have to go where they are and do that recruitment. And so I think it's somewhat on the utility to make themselves more appealing and to go get the talent where they are.
No, yeah, and there's a few things I want to add to what Phil, Marshall, y'all said too. And first, someone once said, I was listening to someone talk about co-ops, and they said it's the place that the civil rights movement missed, right? And and I thought that really resonated with me. It was powerful. And then your statement of the over 900 and then that's 3 really highlights something like that, right? And in the recruiting of high quality students, this idea, when I got to Stanford, I was the only one in my department, right? And the only one that looked like me. And Stanford just had this hubris of, oh, people will come to us. People know about Stanford. They'll apply to us. If they're quality, they'll come to us. There was no thought or approach or action or money put behind, money being a key aspect of it, money put behind to go find these high quality students. It just was this understanding that, oh, we're this and people will find us. And so I think that transitions us though into what do organizations really need to do to have a real impact, right? In this lack of, and Hewitt, you touched on it a little bit. I think everyone really did touch on a little bit, but I'll ask to kind of go, have y'all go a little further.
Yeah, Anthony, I'll go first. Certainly, we all get it that the time is now. There's an urgency regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of the letters were great that most of the CEOs, a lot of CEOs across the country wrote regarding systemic racism after the George Floyd murder. But we must start putting some things into action. And I would say, really, in order to really reach the masses with this, people do need help in understanding the business case, because I don't think a lot of folks understand that. And if we can get to a level where you can speak to people in their language, dollars and cents, then we can start establishing some movement. And then two, the opportunity is now to have something, using President Obama's term, shovel ready, for people, to not just talk about it at a high level, but to go ahead and have something that, people can actually put into action around, metrics, diversity, equity, inclusion. How many of your suppliers are minority owned or African American owned businesses? What are you doing with your pipeline of talent right now within your utility to have an executive team that looks a little more like America? These types of initiatives. And then two, just I would say really working with the policymakers. We cannot negate the fact that there are some I'll say laws, for the lack of a better word, that prohibit us being more aggressive than we have been in the past. And what I mean by that is we really must work on some of the laws in terms of felons being able to re-entry back into the workspace. I'll just give a live example. And just very recently, right now, I'm the executive sponsor of our HR team. We're kind of in transition, but I'm working with our HR team where I am. And I was very intentional on at least one out of 2 or 3 line techs that we were bringing on. We needed to start doing a better job of bringing forth diverse candidates. And so we were able to find one. He passed muster through the application interview process, but then we went through the whole process around the background checks. And it could have gone either way, but it would have been very risky for me to make the decision to move forward in that manner, and something happened from a safety standpoint. And then to some of the access that we have, I would say, to federal funding. So I couldn't really move forward in the manner that I wanted to, but still my challenge even to our HR team is to work very hard at making sure that we can find more diverse candidates to present, particularly to a trade that is showing a deficit in the operations trade when you look at line technicians. And so a couple of things there packed into that, but certainly we do have some opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, the criminal justice system, I think it's time that we all just be explicit. Black men are being arrested often for things they didn't do, or they're sentenced to greater crimes than what they did do, right? Like that, this isn't a opinion. This is backed by miles of facts, miles of research, right? So when you connect the ability to get a job, the ability to vote to the criminal justice system, you're automatically disenfranchising us, right? And so I think that's a great point, Marshall. Phil, you want to say, Hewitt?
I'll jump in. I think the question still is, what can organizations do? And from a private sector like Cox Enterprises, I think there is no quick solution, right? There is no quick solution. We're not going to promote every African American to the CEO spot and all that kind of stuff. But I think just having the conversation like we're having today bringing an awareness to the issue that will stir up conversations among folks who normally would never have a conversation together. It breaks down those barriers within these organizations, which allows people to judge you based on your performance and not based on who you know in your skin color, so to speak. And I think Cox is trying to do that and done a much better job at it. And I think I'm thankful for it because we are reacting positively to the situations that we're seeing out in the community. But I think we need to continue to build on that. And that's why my earlier comment about being numb to it. I don't want it to die as some programs have done in the past, where we react to something really quickly, get all stirred up, and then 6 months to a year, we're back to the same old. I'm ever hopeful that we will continue to have those conversations. The other thing I think we ought to do as a company is to really focus on our recruitment to bring in the young new talent and inexperienced talent, but definitely the new talent we need to broaden our net of where we get our new talent.
Yeah, Anthony, everyone's touched on a lot. Marshall and Hewitt have touched on a lot, and I would echo what Marshall said is that what moves the day in America most likely is capitalism and money, and how do we create the environment for our communities as to why diversity and inclusion matters. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm always trying to do is really trying to articulate from a business owner standpoint, us doing business with, the utility and partners like ICF, in which we've done work with, it really helps the community on multiple levels. Not only can we hire people and employ people, and really, and I would say this too, the hiring process is so subjective. I didn't know this before I got into owning a company. But that piece of paper that comes across your desk, you never know whether you're not getting that call because of your name, the company to, or whatever the case may be. So it's such a subjective factor. And so I've had folks that I've hired from HBCUs who were literally, and I can't make this story up, literally in my office in tears because they didn't think they were going to find an opportunity anywhere else, and that they have been jobs looking for opportunities. And, they were just happy to get an opportunity with us. And so there's that piece, which is hiring and jobs. But then there's also, too, what I would call the philanthropy piece, too, as well. I typically tend to focus on efforts to help other Black men. So what do? We give scholarships to young Black folks, males and females, who are entering the STEM fields every year as a company. And that's part of us being active in the community. And most recently, I've got roped into helping build entrepreneurship curriculum in the Baltimore City school system. So who knew that I'd even be a part of this, But to your point, we got to move beyond, and Anthony, you made a great point earlier, we got to move beyond your zip code dictating your outcomes. And we've got to have, the young man or woman who grew up in the toughest part of town needs to have the same opportunity as even my two sons do as well, and everyone else. So we've got to get beyond your zip code dictating your outcomes.
Yeah, and there's a historical context to that, right? Redlining has pushed Black families into specific areas, so that when you look at the segregation that still exists across America, you can tell. You see the remnants of those aspects. And so when you think about what companies need to do to have a real impact, they have to be, for me, they have to be resilient and assertive, right? They need to, because they're coming into a place that has a historical context of, we've been screwed over before, right? For lack of an elegant way to say it, constantly, right? So then you got someone else coming in here. And often if you send someone who doesn't look like us, there's automatically a skepticism that is based in historical experiences of our families before us, right? Of our parents and forefathers, right? And so you need to be resilient, understanding that it's not going to be easy. But if you want to make a real impact, you got to be resilient and assertive with it. And then I like that some places are looking at this term diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Because once you find the folks, once you go out and grab them and you convince them to take a chance and come to your space, because it is for us taking a chance sometimes to be the first that goes into no one wants to be the only one that looks like them and have those experiences. I had a friend who graduated Georgia Tech. We were both doing PhD. Roommate, he was doing his PhD at chemical engineering. And he came home in tears one day because everyone's complaining about the lion that got shot, but no one mentioned the black man, right? He was just frustrated, right? And that doesn't stop in school. That continues in the workplace, in those conversations. And so this idea of belonging and maintaining folks there, I think is critical. Why a Black-owned company or individual should be given a shot, I think is kind of a nice transition topic to what we were just talking about. So it's what they really need to do to have an impact. But then the other side of that is, or correlated with that is, why should a Black-owned company or a Black person be given a shot or taken a chance on?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Anthony. I mean, I think I'll give you my vantage point. We are headquartered in the city of Baltimore, which is 60% African American, 62% African American population. I think everyone here on this call is very familiar with some of the challenges that are faced here, in our city. But I would say the challenge that the city has is really economic in nature, because we talk about outcomes out of certain zip codes. The best way to stop a bullet is providing jobs for folks. And so you need Black businesses who want to do business with, other firms, organizations, or again, help in a manner that helps that community. And so I'm a big, even as an African-American company, I need to be just as cognizant of my diversity. And so I focus on, do we have enough women in our company? Do we have enough younger folks in our company? Do we have enough older folks in our company? In making sure that there's diversity, because look, you only get stretched when you're put in uncomfortable situations, So, even as a, African-American business owner, I just can't have a bro shop with just, men talking about sports all day, because we don't elevate our game if that's kind of how we're structured or we're set up. So that's a long-winded way of saying why do business, because I think more than anything else, we're going to be very cognizant of what the room looks like, what the company, how it's being built out. And I think there's just a level of, we want to make sure that it's just not about us, it's about the community as well.
I think your question, Anthony, too, was about why should they be given a shot? I don't work in the private sector like Phil, but I have some relatives who have engineering firms here in Atlanta. And quite frankly, they should be given a shot because they're qualified. They're just as qualified as the majority white firms. They have the same issues and inaccuracies as the majority white firms. They're just like the white firms. So they should be given a shot because they can do the job. They can absolutely do the job. It really kind of, you talked earlier about microaggression, right? If I can do the job as your coworker, but you can't hire a firm because you don't think they're qualified because of the skin color of the owner of the business, what are you saying about me as your coworker, right? So it really, that's one of those little microaggressions. So I think at the bottom line, they're qualified. They're absolutely qualified. They're not hard to find. But if your circle of opportunities and companies you deal with is closed to where you're not comfortable opening yourself to those minority businesses, then you won't find the minority business that can do the job. You won't. But so I think they're qualified, and you have to be open to those opportunities to do business with those firms.
Both of my co-panelists here made some very profound points regarding this, and just, in essence, really it is, to Hewitt's point, the right thing to do. But to pivot it, going back to that whole conversation, Phil, around capitalism, it certainly does give a business a competitive advantage as well. We can think about it from the standpoint, look at the companies out here who are damaging their reputation, and then they're in reputation management mode because there wasn't an African American at the table before some commercial went out. I think I saw even right now during the holidays, Burt's Bees, sent out commercials and pictures and 4 or 5 different families, and the only African American family there is one that did not have a father. So what is the message that you're telling your African American customers? And so there's a business case as well, but it's the right thing to do as well, to Hewitt's point. And I believe customers overall are expecting diversity. I would say what gives me a lot of hope, particularly in the millennial generation, is they're bringing forth and they're pushing that envelope around diversity, equity, and inclusion and sustainability. And so there's a lot of innovation. I think Phil was talking about it just now, that we do stretch ourselves when we are around people who do not look like us, who do not have the exact same experiences, because you can get a lot of perspective before you come to a conclusion. And I just think that there will be a lot of companies who would not be experiencing some of the damage to their reputation that they do experience at times because of the fact that they're not stretching themselves to get diverse viewpoints.
No, I like what all of y'all are saying. I'm going to push it a little bit further, right? Because we all know that there's a risk associated with our skin color, right? We walk in the door and we are applying for an opportunity. If you're a company, you're talking to VCs, there's an added risk associated with us. So for me, I think about Hewitt, when you say they're as qualified. Yes, and I would say yes, and because you look at two companies and they're at the same place, and one's black run and one is, we'll say, white run. We know, and we've talked about this, that black man or black woman had a lot to go through in America to get to that point, right? There was doors that they had to, or barriers and obstacles that they had to overcome as a black man in America that my counterparts just simply do not have to overcome. And as Phil's point, do not even have to think about, right? So this idea of, oh, they're as qualified, that's the on the paper, but then that just talks about kind of equality, right? And it doesn't really push the envelope in terms of adjusting this gap. If we were today, if every company today just said, we're going to be equal with our hiring practices, and they actually were, right? Let's and assume that they were equal and they were hiring diversity here and there. Well, the fact of the matter is then the gap that exists is just going to stay the same, right? Like it's not going to get worse, but it's not going to get any better either, because they're not taking into a comprehensive aspect of, it's not just about where they are now, but it's where they came from, right? And if you're going to go in the trenches, if you want to bring someone on in your company that's going to be pushing things, I would take the person who's been through more and has had to overcome more in the first place. And that's just not really taken into account in the hiring process or in the promoting process within companies. What's your thoughts on that?
I'll jump in. I'll jump in real quick, Anthony. I only have one point. The issue you raised in terms of being equal, the two companies being equal, I think if you had to take and step back and look at that African American firm that survived the years and is able to build on the job or be in the room, they've had to build a laundry list of trust and relationships to be there. It is that their on-ramp is much longer than their white counterpart. And so when you do step out and you do step out on faith and hire a minority firm, they have been through a lot. And the other thing they have done is typically they can't make a lot of old craps along the way, because if they do, they won't be at the table. They won't be at the table. They can't make the number of old craps and recover from them like their white counterparts. So to your point, that firm that shows up and is bidding on jobs that is managed by an African American that has been successful for several years, they've been through a lot to get to that point. And so as qualified probably is an undersell in that regard. They're probably a little more qualified, a little better. But I would want to at least add that point. they've built a lot of trust in the community to get those goals and those projects, to keep that company going for the years that they've been involved.
Hewitt, you see this smile on my face. I couldn't have said it any better, man. I mean, that's, real story. We started our company with $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no friends and family round.
Mm-hmm.
There was no capital raise to, people that you went to college. There was 10 grand, and I'll go on a stretch to say it was tough getting that 10 grand amongst 3 people together. And so while I looked at that as a deficit, we learned early on as a company, you can't just throw money at a problem. You've got to figure it out. And it's such a part of our DNA where we've done everything in our company. We've done that role. And now we're a little bit better off than where we started 10 years ago. But you bring all that ingenuity to the table when you're doing business with us. Like, no money, no problem. We're going to figure it out. That's kind of our mantra. And so, we historically, we've always done more with less. I watch my parents. My dad was a mail carrier. My mom was an admin. I don't know if anybody else experienced this, but you can't pick up everything in the store that you want. That's not in the budget. You can put that back, Or when you get to the cash register, there's not enough money. So you got to then put stuff back. Here, take that back. We can't buy that. So that's just the mindset that you come with and the experiences that you come with being an African-American business owner.
Yeah, and guys, I really have nothing to add to that. My colleagues here have really laid that in terms of just no room for error. There is none, and you get that with us when you bring us to the table. And to Phil's point, we're very resourceful. We find a way to make it happen, and that's the mantra.
Yeah, no, I mean, at HBCUs, right? Yeah. Just like in our communities, there's a huge difference in money available, right? You look at Stanford with the billions of dollars, and in comparison, we competed against Duke University and other schools like that in our engineering competitions. And I remember I was the head of the concrete canoe team, and we literally had to find resources, had to go and ask for donations for paint to paint our concrete canoe that we created. We had to get donations of fly ash from the nearby, spot. It wasn't, oh, let's just buy something. Let's create a class for this, right? The resources that they had at their disposal. And then being able to be at Stanford, I got to get the flip side of it, right? The almost unlimited resources that you have at your disposal. You kind of get lazy with it, right? Like, let's be honest, when you don't have to think about what you would do if you didn't have that money, then it's a skill set, to Phil and Hewitt, it's a skill set that's hard to learn in that situation, and that we naturally, because of the realities of what America has done to the black folks here, it's something we've all had to learn and focus on and develop, or we don't get to where we want to be. So I'm looking at the time. We got one more big one, and I think this will carry us over to the Q&A. Why is racial equity in energy important?
So I'll go first in this one, and I can speak for my experiences working at Roanoke Electric Cooperative. And of course, you all know, you saw it in my bio. I've been in the industry for 27 years. My leader is also African-American, our CEO, and together I feel that we've done a lot of great work by being African-American and understanding the high level of responsibility that goes with operating in this space, particularly to a low-income community here in Northeastern North Carolina. You were talking about redlining earlier, Anthony. You could look at that same heat map around redlining, and you can look at energy burden across America, and they're going to be the exact same catchment areas. And so we've really worked on a lot of programs to address energy burden, but I feel that we've done it in a way, going back to being innovative in a way where we've created a sustainability model for the business. Good examples of that. We have a tariff on bill financing program that really provides more inclusivity in energy efficiency financing. We've been able to finance more energy efficiency projects than we've ever done before. We've had several iterations of these types of programs over the years during my tenure, but we're at a place now where we're breaking through and we're getting a lot of projects done. And so with that, we're also finding ways to even break through and address some of the housing issues that we have here in our region by addressing health and safety issues at the homes that will make them weatherization ready, because obviously there's a weatherization issue here in the region. And so by being around the people and of course acknowledging it from growing up and understanding the struggle of growing up as an African American, certainly there's a design of empathy around many of the programs that we put together, but also at the same time, we always try to make sure that there's no cross subsidization from other ratepayers within our organization. We've also, at this point, we're rolling out a broadband project. This whole pandemic, again, has really shown us more and more time and again, the separation between the haves and the have-nots. And certainly in rural America, we see it in broadband, but certainly in the African-American space. And so there's a gap that needs to be closed there. So we've started a broadband build out, whereas we have invested and created our own competitive local exchange carrier that ultimately will provide broadband connectivity across our service territory, hence creating more economic development opportunities, but also raising the capacity of every household in our service territory. We're currently looking at electric vehicles, making the business case around the total cost of ownership and how we can address what we call pocketbook issues in our region by relieving some of the expense around owning a vehicle through savings. So we have those opportunities upon us as well. Currently working very closely in the low to moderate income space with community solar. And we've been able to successfully work with the philanthropic community to help us assist low to moderate income owners, homeowners in our service territory own solar. And in doing so, we're leveraging that against some of the investments that we need to make into a person's home to make it, again, weatherization ready. And then finally, another program that we brought forth, which is very atypical in the electric co-op space. I know that we're the only one in America doing so, but we've started a sustainable forestry and land retention project, because this region that we're in is rich with forest land, and there are so many African-American families who lose out on the ability of making it a performing asset due to heirs property and issues like that. So really, when you ask that question, Anthony, it goes back to innovation, finding ways and resources to make sure that you can connect with your customers or member owners in our case. And so we're continuing, of course, to build on all this momentum. We've done a lot of great things over time, but we realize there's still a lot to do. And so in all of it, this whole conversation around racial equity also bleeds over into opportunities, even for those who are impacted by this energy business.
Yeah, I think Marshall covered it. I mean, he hit everything, hit all the right notes there. I think it really just boils down to making sure when you talk equity that the programs and the initiatives that are being put forth by the utility sectors, we have a shot. We understand, we understand that they're out there, and that those programs and those things will actually enhance our quality of life. Because, typically, we live in some of the poorest dwellings, in the country that are not efficient. We're actually working with Baltimore Gas and Electric on their EV program, and EV is not even remotely being thought of as regards to, from an equity standpoint, for Black and brown communities in our region. And so we got to make sure that information gets there. And then I think just from a basic, everyone pays their utility bills, equally. So why isn't there equity in regard to the resources that are going to these same communities? Because, a Black person's energy bill is going to be the same if they use the same amount of kWh. So let's make sure that there are resources that are designed and there's equitable nature, and understand that you might have to go a little bit further to make sure that they understand the programs than you typically would for someone who may be a stay-at-home, worker. I can work from home and I can cruise the internet and I don't have to go out and leave my home every day, and may not be as in tune with some of those resources. So I'll let Hewitt chime in on that as well.
I'll just touch back real quickly. In my role at Cox, I handle all of the energy conservation and and water initiatives around our sustainability area. And there's some other folks that handle our waste area. So there's three prongs in Cox's sustainability efforts: water, waste, and carbon. And I have a big role in carbon and I own water, so to speak. And so when we talk about equity, my mind goes right to what do those communities look like when we bring sustainability to those communities? Well, first of all, minority communities are not very involved and have never been really included in the sustainability movement. We've got some organizations that are really working on that, but the sustainability really is about health and money, really, in conservation. I mean, we heard about energy burden and cost in terms of their billing. That goes right to improving the weatherization things for low-income housing. When I also think about it in my purview is water. You've got some of the poor streams and polluted streams and lakes in those African American and low and minority in locations. And how does that relate to health? And we typically have our minority populations living close to factories that off-gas pollutants that impact their health. So that's where I go when I think about equity. We have to bring equity to those communities in terms of their health, their ability to have a quality standard of living. The other thing that I think about when we think about that, as soon as we bring equity, we have to protect those communities because you hear that gentrification term starts to come up. You know, I joked with Anthony during our one-on-one. You don't really see a whole lot of folks putting trees down Martin Luther King Boulevard because in most communities, Martin Luther King Boulevard goes into, through, or ends at the minority community. But there's not a whole lot of trees being planted on that boulevard because, you know, once you start doing that, the cost of living in that environment goes up, and then those citizens become dislocated because of that standard of living. They can't really cover their cost of living in the village. So equity is important, but we've got to be very aware of how that impacts the community to which we're trying to bring equity to. So it really impacts their health and their ability to have a cost-effective standard of living. Maybe it's in the wrong word. That's why.
So you touched on something that's interesting, and I didn't think I would. I'll address that before I say my thoughts are on racial equity, and that is the idea of how improving Black areas could actually push Black folks out of those areas.
We've seen it. The Beltline here in Atlanta is a great example of that. Minority communities were in those spaces, surviving because they were surrounded by polluted streams and creeks, dump sites for tires. But as soon as we started cleaning up those areas from an environmental standpoint, the cost of that property increased, the taxes increased, and those communities, those citizens are being pushed out, so to speak. So we have to be very cognizant as we bring equity, especially around sustainability to different environments, different parts of our community. We've got to be cognizant that we're not dislocating the populations that we need.
Nice. I was on a call earlier this morning, and this brother who's got his PhD from Georgia Tech, he was and he works at NREL, and he was talking about that if we want to get to 100% clean energy, right, then we need to reach 100% of the people, right? Like 20%, reaching 20% ain't going to do it. And I like that. When I think about equity, I distinguish equity from justice. I see equity as the tools, the resources, the access to implementing solutions, right? I see justice as changing the landscape that those people or organizations have to operate in, making it easier to operate in, right? So I use the analogy of an organization's pushing a solution up a hill. The hill is justice, right? Adjusting the steepness of that hill is justice. Giving that organization the tools to push that solution is equity. So before I go into why racial equity is in energy important to me, I'm curious, what do y'all think about that delineation between equity and justice?
I do think they're different. justice, I do see your point there. To me, equity is more leveling the playing field, right? If we're going to bring, I think justice is as well, but I do think they're a little different. I think I need a little more time to delineate my thoughts on it, but I do think they are different. You kind of caught me there.
Yeah, I didn't prep you for this one.
That's kind of on the list there, but I do think they're different.
Yeah.
I
I think
no one's
they're
going to
different.
take me to jail if I don't do something equitably. But I don't know.
Yeah, I would say equity, and I'm going to use it from a capital standpoint. Equity is always included a stake in. I have equity in my home. I have equity in a business. I have justice is just, can I get justice? It's totally different. Can it be? Can you do right by me? Like, so I look at it as two different things. Like, justice is, can you do right by someone, individual, or a group of people? I think equity is more so being involved and included into that and in that process.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say the same. There's definitely a difference. That's a great question too, Anthony. But yeah, the more I think about that, there's definitely a difference. Because again, equity is treating everybody exactly the same. And I guess even on our jobs, when we think about it, those of us who are leaders, sometimes treating everybody exactly the same is not a justice, because all situations are different that are presented to us. There could be two different situations presented that look exactly the same way, but then when you get down to the people involved and responding to make sure that you're getting the outcome for that specific in the situation, then you're looking more at the justice lens at that time. So I could see that there's a difference between the two.
I was just curious. I was like, you know what? I want to see what y'all think about my separation of the two. So for me, racial equity in energy is important because focusing on racial equity can accelerate our transition to a clean energy economy. I think we all are aware of not just the ticking clock that we have to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in our atmosphere, but also the realities that we exist in, right? The inequities and injustices that exist from an environmental and energy standpoint. Marshall, you talked about energy burden. Phil, you touched on some things too. We need to utilize this opportunity as we transition to clean energy economy to also address that gap, the wealth gap, the health gap, right? Fill in the blank gap that exists between Black Americans and white Americans, right? If that is the standard that we say, okay, well, we need to work towards that. And I think that this is our last best chance to do that, right? Like, what other dramatic infrastructure change thing is coming down the pipeline, right? To get to 100% clean energy, to a clean energy economy, we need to adjust everything. Every single industry that we're working in has to be touched. Marshall, you were about to say something. Jump in, man.
Yeah. I was going to say, and I've said this a couple times today, and certainly there's an urgency right now given the state of affairs. Time is continuing to pass, though, past George Floyd's murder. And there's a tendency to, again, become more desensitized to take us back to where we were. But as I've been, a theme, I guess, that I've been talking about a lot today has been around the business case and the economics, the capitalist side of it all. And when I think about it, even down to some of the programs that we're doing, there's an opportunity for us to close the gap, but also at the same time, create a sustainability model for the utility. And here's my point. I talked about it earlier. We have quite a few homes on our system that have needs around urgent repairs, health and safety issues that need to be cleared. Those are some of the most inefficient homes on our system. They're contributing to our peak and really not improving our load factor. So what we're learning is the more that we can really help these homes become more energy efficient, they are avoiding some of the contribution to our peak demand costs, which is that thin, narrow window of time that we're always trying to keep as minimal as possible. So the more that we could really work toward addressing that, because that's a big part of our spend as an electric distribution system. We don't really own anything, but about 45% of our wholesale power purchase is committed capacity. So we have a lot of room to operate in terms of avoiding peak. So a lot of our programs that we're doing, and we're working with organizations to help us monetize it, through measurement and verification type programs. So there is a model around a business case. And as I've said before, the more that we can use this opportunity to let it parlay also into the economic conversation, how does it affect your P&L? What does it do to your balance sheet? I think we have a better opportunity to be successful.
I would say, Anthony, that any large company nowadays recognizes that they are in the energy business. I mean, part of their bottom line is energy. In a direct way to impact that bottom line is to reduce their expenses. And one of those key expenses in many companies, such as Cox, it's the energy bill, right? And so over the past, I guess Cox Conservative started in 2006. We've done close to 500 individual projects, and all of them, in totality, we've had a rate of return north of 15% on those projects. So to Marshall's point, that business model, that business case is there. I often get frustrated when I hear that there's not the case, because I do it every day, even from energy conservation to solar to even in one case wind, and so I get often frustrated because those jobs and those projects, they go through countless scrutiny between our engineering company, our engineers, our management, our leadership, legal, tax. We go through the gauntlet to get a project done, and we've been able to do 500 of those projects since 2006, and with great returns. So we see it every day. And our utility partners are standing there with rebates and incentives for us to even make those projects even better. So, and the other thing I think you kind of hinted at in your earlier question was, how do we make this more equitable to minority communities? Well, on the back end of those projects are jobs. We go out and we put in megawatts of solar, and we have a landfill gas to electric project up in West Virginia that we operate. We hired 2 guys to operate that facility for us. We hire a team of folks to make sure our solar arrays are working and operating, because when they stop operating, that's when we start losing money. We got a tire recycling plant down in Hunter, Georgia, where we take in tires, we burn wood waste, we break those tires back into their original components, and then sell the gases and the metals that come out of that and make a profit of it. But we hired 5 guys to operate that plant. Those are good paying, renewable, sustainable jobs that are going to go on for years. And I think what we have to understand is that I won't say triple bottom line, but it's great for the business, because we're actually saving money, we're being more efficient, and we're creating jobs along the way. I think it's a win for a lot of folks.
So Phil, you want to say anything else before I think we're about to jump to questions?
No, I'll let you jump. There are some questions in the chat, so I'll let you jump to those. So we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah. So Pam, I'll let you line them up.
Thank you, gentlemen. This was such a wonderful discussion, and we've got some great questions here. So we were talking about early workforce development. What I'm hearing a lot in my particular role in working with organizations is they don't know where to find us, y'all. They don't know where the Black people are or where the minorities are. So this question kind of relates to that. It said, this came from Arafili. She had to drop off, but she wanted to ask, are there any notable existing efforts that you like to mention around including young Black folks in clean energy jobs, like organizations specifically dedicated to doing this or doing it particularly well? Have you guys heard of any initiatives? Do you know of anything? I will say that from what I found in my particular role, it's hard. the workforce development piece is a hard piece for many organizations. But what have you guys seen out there?
I don't know off the top of my head of any workforce development. I know they're out there. I have a name in mind that I probably can dig and forward to the chat. But I do know that we host several interns within Cox, and I'm sure that other companies have internship roles in their sustainability programs, in their sustainability organizations that are typically published in the winter to be filled during the summer, so that we expose folks that are still in college typically to what we do in sustainability, and that's been very successful. In fact, I often talk to some of the younger folks through some mentoring opportunities that I've had, but that's typically how we hire our new hires. They typically are coming through our internship programs and then being offered positions post-graduation. So I would push that as one of the avenues that if you wanted to get in this space, and especially if you're in college and want to get in this space, I think that would be a good opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think we have that history that Hewitt brings and what they've done, and that sounds like that's been very successful. I will say that I'm seeing more, particularly in the electric utility space, where there are intentional efforts to be active at an HBCU, going to a career fair, things of that nature, and I'm hearing more in terms of recruitment efforts to bring HBCU students into internships. So not enough of a sample to say that it's been successful yet, but these are things that are on the mind of some of the executives that I'm talking to now.
Yeah, and I'll give two examples. One is the American Association of Blacks in Energy. There's a scholarship, that there's a focus on helping students enter into the STEM fields. They give a $20,000 scholarship each year, and each year they do it at their they do a luncheon every year at their national conference with the students and bring them in. And also, even on a chapter basis, we do what's called BEAM Month, which is the month of October, Black Energy Awareness Month, where we speak to some of the local schools in regards to, fields in. The other thing I would say, a utility that's done a remarkable job is here in our backyard, Baltimore Gas and Electric, where they really have been active in the community and really have focused on workforce development and also supply chain development as well, minority firms. However, I must add, Calvin Butler, who's African-American male, was really the one who helped facilitated that. And you noticed a stark difference between, when Calvin took leadership as CEO of Baltimore Gas and Electric and previous regimes, but they have done a really good job with workforce development as a utility.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I would assume the National Society of Black Engineers, NSBE, would be a spot that is doing something. I can't say for sure, but there's thousands of Black engineers that show up to those conferences every year. And I know the Allen Group is a Black-run company out in California, and their president, Shotzi, went to the NSBE conference and was just shocked to see that many Black engineers, and she's a Black woman. So I can imagine just showing up to something like that. BEA, that happens often in DC, Baltimore, Philly, the Black Engineer of the Year Awards. They have a great convention that has a great, a significant number of Black engineers showing up. So I would say those places are where you can go quickly to find diversity in Black engineers pretty easily who would be interested in your company.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that. And we have a gentleman by the name of Steve Epstein. Steve, are you still on the line? I'd like for you to ask your question.
Sure. Thank you. Excuse me. We've talked some about the social divide, and I think that that there's a lot of hope there since the summer, much more so than the red-blue social divide, which is going in the wrong direction. But I'm more interested in actual tactical things. I do EVs, and Tesla is not equitable, never has been. But a used Nissan Leaf for somebody is way more equitable. And what are the different structural things that we can, earlier this morning, I was something on housing. I saw a little film called Segregation by Design, So the systemic racism is way deep. It needs to be, it's a wall that needs to be broken down by all of us. And I heard some programs, like criminal justice is something that's systemic and deep. The check the box in the employment thing is another structural thing. And as Marshall was saying about having programs that are designed to finance those that are not financeable, right? Whether you upfront, whether you change the bill and you do it over time. Anyways, what other programs can we implement that will really change things? Because I don't think we're going to overnight change the, get rid of the oil plant that's next to the, Black community or whatever.
Yeah, I'll go first because I'll give a plug because this book, I don't know if everyone can see it, Cast, really helps center you around historic structural nature. It's a phenomenal book. And even someone who's African-American, I didn't even understand all the stories and everything that's in part of that. So I highly recommend everyone first read Cast. And just to give you a one snippet of the book that was startling, African-Americans in this country would have, in 2111, everyone on this line will probably be long gone by then, and probably our kids. 2111 will be the first year that African Americans in this country have been free longer than they've been enslaved. Let that sink in for a second. 2111. So that's a long time for now. So I say all that to say, Steve, I don't have any programs, but I think the one thing I would say is just continuing to educate yourself, like it sounds like you've been doing, and finding the lane that I think that works best for you, what you're most passionate about, and bring some equity to the table and helping that particular lane. But it's, I started reading this book and it was really an eye opener for me. And I don't get any royalties from it. It's just a good book. I hope everyone pick it up. But it really centers you around kind of the historic nature of how race was used as a caste system in America.
Yeah, in the class, Racial Equity and Energy that I co-taught with Holmes Hummel, one of the takeaways from that was whatever solution or program you come up with, it can't be one-dimensional, right? Because the issues that are facing Black communities in this country are not one-dimensional. And so whatever program or solution you come up with, you can know it's probably not a good one if it's one-dimensional. So I'll just say that.
Thank you. One question that came across from is, I don't know if David, and David, I'm probably gonna pronounce your last name wrong, Yosukyo? Thank you. David, can you ask your question? Because I really like this question.
Yeah, so I guess for me, I'm a student, but so like for me, I'm thinking about when not in the leadership position, how have you been able to raise concern for issues about race in the workplace? And then like, are there any significant times you can remember you held your tongue because you didn't feel comfortable doing so?
I think I've held my tongue more than I've spoken up, Dave.
Yeah.
David, I won't be so familiar with David. There are times when it's funny because it's personal, right? It's really, really personal. There have been days when I've left my house and I've said to my wife, this is a red beans and rice day. And she kind of knows what that is. And I'll let you into my home. That means that on today, I'm going to do something in the office that may get me fired, and we may have to go live with my parents in New Orleans and eat red beans and rice. And there are moments in your career, as in your life, where you just kind of head it up to, and you're going to do what you have to do and let the chips fall where they may. There have been few, I will say that, and I'm very thankful for that. But there's been some times when I think my brother Anthony mentioned having to be very qualified or the most qualified. It was one of the things my mom kept drilling on me. The reason I got my PE license, because I had to have all of my boxes checked. And then you go on the site, on the project, with a college fresh out that you're training, and they look to the college fresh out in terms of the quality of work when I'm the one doing the work, or when my colleagues at work denigrate my ability because of my skin color. There have been very few in those instances,
Yeah.
but I've had some abuse and rights days in my career.
Yeah, and I'd say of course, I've been in the industry almost as long as Hewitt, and his intro statement, I'll say the same for me. Certainly there have been times where you rise to the occasion, but then there are times where you may bite your tongue. There's a reason even today, right? We're having this conversation in 2020. We wouldn't have had it in 2019. So we're not the only ones. There are a lot of folks who bit their tongue for the sake of being able to maintain the livelihoods that they do have. But I was going back to your question. You mentioned when not in a leadership position, and most of my career I've spent doing some level of leadership, but I would say at a lower level than where I am now, where I had less influence. I've had peers that I've had to work with, and one thing that's specific to me, I knew it was racial, and it was impacting other folks who look like me, but the way I addressed it was I dealt with it on a level of being knowledgeable about what this one individual was doing to keep information away from me and from others so that we could be successful in our jobs. And it's so interesting, going back to some of the points said earlier, that we found a way, right? And there were times, especially in my early career, where I would work around people that didn't even know what I was doing to get the information that I needed, when it would have been much simpler if I could have worked with them, but I had to work around them. And you've heard the old adage, I guess you appreciate it more when there's a struggle to get it, right? And so by the time I talk to that individual about all of my knowledge of the subject matter, he's blown away. And going back to validity, I've had folks ask me, well, how did you know that? Things like that, because they thought that I found a way to break the system to get the information, when really all they had to do was let me get it. And so, I've advocated on behalf of folks who look like me on things that even within the organization would marginalize us against being successful in our jobs, by continuing to rise to the occasion, to be knowledgeable, to be persistent. And that's a key word, persistent.
Yes, sir.
In getting exactly what you need to do what you need to do. That's what we do, right? I mean, everyone, Anthony, you said it earlier, you move forward to get your PhD. That's persistence. Hewitt just mentioned about the PE. Of course, Phil has done great things with his organization. And so just keep fighting and keep making sure that you can meet people at their level and continue to exceed beyond them.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we're at the 131 mark, 132 mark. There is one really good question came in from Jill Ferguson that I just really want to squeeze in. Jill, can you please ask this question? Because I just think it's so important. And then we'll kind of conclude with it.
Yeah, I mean, this comes from something that I've seen, like when I'm in the NRECA conference and Curtis Wynn is up on stage and there's like thousands of people in the audience who are all white, listening to him literally make the capitalism, like business case utility argument for reducing energy burdens, showing them the money. And nobody else there talks about pay as you save or tariffed on bill financing, like barely claps. It barely makes it into any ACEEE reports. When it does, it's like, they say that it's like not scalable. It barely makes it into the finance conference. And then 5 minutes before Curtis's presentations and that big NRECA conference, they like give all just outstanding applause to this kid who danced for like 5 minutes and sang a country song. So I can't help but think that like pay as you save, tariffed on bill, land retention, all the EV stuff that REC is doing isn't scaling and isn't making like headlines at big ACEEE conferences and stuff, just because the pioneers are Black and Marshall and Curtis. So I just wonder, like, do they feel that too? Have you had that experience?
Well, to answer your question, yes. And I appreciate that question. I'll give this quick backstory. I know we're right here at the end, but last year, my leader again, he gave a very impactful speech at the conference. And before he went up, Jill, I was sitting beside a couple of guys who were, from another co-op. and we were able to make a connection through college basketball. The state they were from, I'm from North Carolina, so we talked about college basketball. So we made a connection. But then Curtis gave his speech, and actually I was in it in the video, speaking. So these folks were sitting right beside me. I would have thought that, okay, they at least would have tapped me and said, "Hey man, that's you." No, they got up and walked out. No acknowledgement of it. But the point in all of that is the piece that I think will be more helpful. I don't even know if that's going to be the answer, is the measurement and verification of it, to quantify the actual results of everything that we're projecting with the work. We have to get deeper in measurement and verification. And I think that's the one final piece that will really help some folks in making a decision that will help their utility, but beyond that, create some empathy designs that will help people who are marginalized within their communities.
Look, anti-Black racism is not, it doesn't make sense. It's not an economical thing, right? People will be racist to you, even if it will cost them money. Right? And I think my biggest fear is that even after you have all the data, even after you have all the evidence to show that something works, if it's delivered by a Black man, it's not going to be accepted. And that's honestly the thing that keeps me awake at night and wonder, are we actually going to reach our goals in terms of sustainability and climate change?
Well, thank you all. What a great way to end this session. I would love to thank Anthony, of course, for moderating, Marshall, Hewitt, and Phil. I appreciate all your thoughts, this conversation with the entire audience, and hopefully we'll have more conversations like these, but you can see why I felt it was important to hear from Black men in this industry, because as a Black woman in this industry, I know what I've kind of seen and gone through, and I know that they've probably gone through almost twice as much. So I just wanted to be a fly on the wall of this conversation. Thank you, gentlemen. We hope to see all of you at our plenary session coming up at 2 p.m. And if you have any questions, please reach out to any of the staff here at SIA or myself, Pamela Phan. But we look forward to seeing you shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.